All right, what's going on, guys? Sorry you may have just barely gotten the invitation to this. We've had some family in town. My brother and sister-in-law actually just moved here to Arizona, and so we've been moving them in and watching their kids, and it's been a lot of late nights. And so usually my kids go to bed about 40 minutes earlier than they did tonight, or really than they have the last couple nights. Those of you with kids can probably relate when things tend to throw off the bedtime schedule. So appreciate you guys' patience in me hopping on a little bit late tonight. But I'm really excited today. We are going to be talking kind of in that same realm of conversation that my last two coaching lives have been about, where it's kind of talking about, self-coaching. We went through the model. Circumstance creates our thoughts, creates our emotion, creates our action, and then that obviously creates our results. And before we get into that portion, when we're going to be talking about naming our emotions or naming that portion of it, I've had a couple questions from a few of my clients about stretching and like mobility work. And so I thought maybe, if they have those questions, it would be good to do a quick little thing about that. So stretching before and after, I think we've talked about it a little bit. I'm a huge proponent of static stretching, as well as myofascial release, which is like foam rolling or lacrosse ball or something like that. I'm a big proponent of it. As a general rule of thumb, both are great. A lot of times it creates a short-term lengthening effect, so it's good to do consistently, but on top of that it's good to do and then also do other types of corrective work. So usually the reason that you're stretching is to increase mobility. It's because you have like a muscular imbalance, right? We sit at a desk all day, so a lot of times our chest is overly tight, and so it's good to go and stretch your pectoralis major, right? Stretch your chest muscle, but then also activate that backside so that it can kind of set it into a better place. So yes, stretching is great before and after. Myofascial release is great before and after. In like a perfect world, if you had all the time in the world to work out, you would do a general warm-up, try to get your body moving. You do some myofascial release beforehand. You do your workout. You would do your stretching afterwards, like your static stretching. That's included in like you do a cool down and then static stretching. So that would be like best case scenario. But I know that most of us have limited time to work out, and so we can just kind of do what we can, which is really awesome. So to kind of dive into the topic for tonight's conversation or tonight's live is, we have that model and that way of thinking, and then last time we talked specifically on how to manage our emotions, detach ourselves from them, but fully feel them, be able to recognize them, feel them, maybe even explain them, try to explain to somebody what that emotion feels like, where does it start, what does that make you feel, and what does that make you act, react, or in action. Kind of fully understanding those things can be really incredible and beneficial, and I think it's something that we maybe don't spend as much time or effort in understanding because it's not tangible, right? Like, we can talk about reps and sets and weights and nutrition, and we can talk about hormones, and we can talk about those things, I feel like, a little bit easier because they're actual things here in the universe, right? Like, insulin is an actual hormone. You can bottle up insulin. It's a legitimate thing. You can bottle up carbs and proteins, and you can see workouts, and you can see sweat and effort. You can even kind of judge effort. But when it comes to mental state and kind of things going on above the neck, sometimes it's a little bit harder to turn those intangible into more tangible ways of thinking, or be able to explain them and that type of thing. And so I think that's one of the reasons that we don't focus as much on it. But obviously, it's something that I really enjoy talking about because I think that it can be so impactful when you work on kind of what's going on above the neck. That can just feed into not only your physical well-being with nutrition and workouts and everything, stress management and everything, but it can also affect your relationships and, inter and external relationships with yourself. It can be really awesome. So one of my favorite things to do when you're dealing with emotions, especially if you are an individual that you've recognized as maybe a little bit more pessimistic or hard on yourself than maybe some other people are, but you can never know exactly how other people feel, and so maybe that's just kind of going on in your head. People will also consider like the natural man, or the individual that kind of thinks pessimistically or negatively about yourself and that type of thing, is to give that individual or that feeling or that emotion or kind of that process a name. So for example, if you've ever seen the show Luca, I think it was produced by the Disney Channel. It's on Disney Plus. I'm pretty positive. My son Legend went through a Luca phase where we watched it, 2 or 3 times a day. It felt like for like two or 3 months. But it's an incredible. It's such a cute show. It's essentially these sea creatures that when they go on land, they become human. And Luca is the main character, and he meets a friend, and that friend is also a sea creature, and he has been on land and learned how to kind of be human a little bit. He kind of bluffs his way through it. But, and I'll try not to give too much of the movie away if you haven't seen it, but part of it is they build a Vespa, and they're taking this makeshift Vespa, which is pretty much just a bunch of garbage pieces with wheels, down a hill. And Luca, his parents are pretty controlling and, never go to the surface and, all this type of thing. And so he has a lot of, anxiety about where he is. He's on the surface, he's with this new person, he's breaking all of these rules that he's had his entire life. And as you can understand, he's a little bit nerve-wracked about it. And he just keeps thinking, oh, well, we shouldn't be doing this. He keeps telling his friend that this is probably not the best thing to be doing. And his friend teaches him a pretty cool lesson where he says, that voice in your head that's telling you to stop doing stuff, that's Bruno. And he's like, wait, what? What do you mean that's Bruno? He's like, that's just Bruno. That's the voice in your head that tells you not to do things. And what you got to do is you got to say Silencio Bruno or Silence Bruno. It's in Italian, is the show takes place, but I think it's Italian. Anyway, so he's pretty much saying quiet Bruno, because Bruno, he's given that voice inside of his head that tells him not to do something scary. He's given it a name, which is Bruno. And so then throughout the show, anytime Luca gets nervous or is scared to do something, he says Silencio Bruno, and then he goes forth with whatever they're doing. Now in this instance, obviously that little voice is him trying to keep him safe, right, from doing a few scary things. But I think it teaches a really great lesson, and I think it's a good story to kind of keep that, drive that information home, where a lot of times we have a voice in our head that says, we're not good enough, or we're not trying our hardest, or you could have done better, or you're not X, Y, and Z close to this other person, or we compare and contrast ourselves to others, or, a lot of these like negative things, especially with social media. Social media can be such an incredible thing, but it also can be a really hard thing if you're an individual that tends to compare themselves to others. And so by giving that person, because that's not actually you, and that's an interesting concept to think about, of being able to separate yourself from your thoughts and recognize that just because you have a thought, that doesn't mean that thought is you. Right? Just because I think something doesn't mean that particular thought is Connor. But it's just a thought that I have, and thoughts are meant to be thought about and dissected and deemed if they're useful or not useful. If I have a thought of, wow, I am not worth anything, right? So that's an initial thought that I think because of maybe a circumstance that I'm in. and then being able to be like, is that thought serving me? Is that thought not serving me? How do I feel when I think that? How do I feel if I were to think differently? Is that going to be a useful thought? Is that a unuseful thought, right? Being able to ask these questions about our own thinking. We're the only we're the only mammal on earth. We're the only being on earth that's able to do that type of self-evaluation and self-thought process of like, oh, are my thoughts actually serving me? And being able to give that thought, give that method of thinking or that tendency a name, such as Bruno, or you can choose any type of name, and there could be multiple names for, I have one for my anxiety, and I have one for my character that says that I'm no good, right? Because those are two different things. Like, wow, I'm super anxious and things could go bad and X, Y, and Z, versus feeling bad and terrible about myself, having different names for that individual, and then telling them Silencio Bruno. Like, that's not me. That's not who I want to be. Those are not my thoughts. Those are not the thoughts that serve me. Those are not useful thoughts, and I choose not to think those thoughts. I think that can be really powerful. So if that's something that aligns with you or you would like to use, I recommend it. Just try it out. It might work perfectly for you. It might not work for you at all. You know what I'm saying? But it's being able to do those types of self-evaluations and tests to see, kind of try this hat on, like, yes, I'm going to start naming my emotions, therefore I can tell them audibly or inaudibly to be quiet so that I can become the best person that I want to be, so that I can better myself. A thought that a lot of times people have, especially kind of in this space, is, kind of that, like, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to spend, time on my workouts. My kids need me more. I don't have the time to work out, or I don't have the time to prepare my food, or I'm not worth that time, or I'm not worth that investment, or I'm not worth, I don't have that type of worth. I'm not worthy of it. I feel like as a dad, I deal with that a decent amount sometimes too, where it's like, even though when I'm giving my 100% at the time, which, 100% can be different. There are some days where my 100% is like up here, like when I'm really trying and I'm just like crushing it. And then sometimes giving my 100%, depending on the circumstances and the day and everything, like my 100% is only down here. You see what I'm saying? And so, but then those thoughts creep in of like, oh, you could be doing more, you're not worthy of all of those like negative thoughts and emotions, and being able to give that an actual name and recognizing it, because then that giving it a name like actually separates it from Connor, from me. It's a different person, it's a different thing, and I don't have to listen to that, and I can choose to think and feel a different way. Like I said, try it out, try that hat on. It might work perfectly for you, it might not resonate, it might not align with you, but I would recommend, giving it a shot, seeing if it works for you. So I appreciate you guys being here with me, and I hope you guys have a great Tuesday night.